Thanks for watching this interview with Mike Meltzer. This interview can be summarized as a cautionary tale with a happy ending. In his words, growing up, he always felt like he was the fat kid. And like many Americans, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. He took meds, he exercised, he thought he was doing everything that he should have been doing. He watched what he ate, or at least he thought, but he found ran into some major complications along the way. But fortunately, at this time, he's regained his health. He's dropped over 140 pounds. He's fundamentally changed what he eats in a day, and poof, there goes the type 2 diabetes. It's amazing. It's an amazing transformation story. So thanks so much for listening to this and watching this little bit longer interview I did with Mike Meltzer. And one more thing I'd like to mention, I am transitioning from video-based interviews on YouTube to strictly podcasts. I just started the Kramer Podcast, which you can find down below in the description, or you can search for it on the iTunes store, where I will be interviewing mainly medical professionals who prescribe plants, who prescribe this lifestyle medicine. I think it can be very beneficial to people. I will also be throwing in a few of these Health Rebels success stories as well. So if you like these interviews that I've done in the past, these Health Rebels prescribed plants interviews, check out my podcast on the iTunes store, where I will be posting podcasts regularly. Thanks so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Mike Meltzer, for joining us from Los Angeles.
Thank you, Ian. Good to meet you.
I want, Mike, for you to set the stage for people who are watching this. Sort of tell us a little bit about your health history and how you became a Forks Over Knives success story.
Okay. Well, basically, I became vegetarian at age 12. I grew up in the New York area, and I just happened to be walking by a kosher chicken butcher market and saw all these chickens hanging and blood everywhere, and I went, no, not doing that anymore. So I decided, okay, now I'm a vegetarian. And that was very rare at that point, because that was mid-60s. And not a lot of people were vegetarians. So my mom was like, what do I make now? What do I cook? And I'm like, not my problem. You're the mom. Mm-hmm. You do the cooking. As it was then. Of course, I've learned now a lot more since. But so I was vegetarian, and people are always bugging me. Oh, you have to have protein. You should eat fish. Eat this. Eat cheese. Blah, blah, blah. Eggs. All that junk. But I was vegetarian pretty much with fish on and off a few times over the years. And then in 2006, I decided, well, I think I'll become vegan, because I had read about it, and it seemed like a good thing to do, both for the animals and for my health and probably the environment and everything else. So I just flat out said, okay, I'm a vegan. No more eggs, no more milk products, no more cheese, none of that stuff. And I had stopped fish back in the early 90s or mid 90s. Finally, as I was back and forth with it. But so I figured, okay, vegan it is. And I thought, well, I've got a Whole Foods right nearby, and they've got tons of vegan stuff. And I just figured, okay, I'll have processed this and fake this, and, a lot of the processed things, and vegan cheeses, and Daya was just coming in, and I kind of got into that, and I would have bread. I did find I was able to drop a bit more weight. I had gone up at my highest in probably the late 90s, early 2000s to about 320. And I was about 6 feet tall. And I was like, no, can't do that. That's got to stop. So I was working real hard at losing weight ever since, like, as long as I can remember, because I was a heavy kid even. I was just, back then it was not a usual thing. It was pretty unusual. So I'd get teased a bit, but not a tremendous amount, but a bit. Anyway, so I became vegan, but I was eating like grilled cheeses and fake this, fake that. And I did find I couldn't eat a lot of the sweets that I liked, the baked goods, because they were not vegan. So that dropped a lot of those off of my plate, which was good. Although, of course, there are now a lot more of those substitutions. So fast forward, so that was 2006. And my health had never really been an issue except for my weight. But I had also, doctors had diagnosed me as being diabetic in probably the early 90s. And they tried me on some pills and things, and I tried them, as you do with doctors generally, or did. And they didn't really do anything for me. Some even put on weight. I said, nah. And I had even been on Avandia, which shortly after that, they took off the market, and I just said, no more with these pills, forget it. Mm-hmm. So I just gave up on that, and I was just trying to go to the gym a lot, work out on the elliptical mainly, and doing some weights work, a regular workout once or twice a week. And I was dropping maybe 10 pounds a year, 15 pounds a year, at most maybe 20. And I kept a spreadsheet of all of it, so I kept track. But then around 2009, late 2009, I was with my family. They were out here visiting in Palm Desert near Palm Springs. And they were commenting, oh, your walking has gotten kind of weird. I was like, hadn't really noticed that. But I also noticed the vision in my right eye was getting a little bit blurry. I was like, whoa, that's a crazy thing. We got to deal with that. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I went back to LA. So I was just, a couple hours drive. So I had driven out there and stayed with them, and then drove back. And I just made a determination, no, this has got to stop. I got to figure it out. Number one, what's going on with my body? I was still at, I'd have to look it up, but I think I was about 245 or so at 6 feet. So it was heavy, but it wasn't horrific. And I had dropped a fair amount of weight, but obviously not nearly enough. And there were health things going on. So I just said, okay, this has got to stop.
You spoke about the complications from your type 2 diabetes that you experienced,
right?
The vision problems and the walking with difficulty. And I kind of want to understand a little bit more about when you said you were taking these pills and they weren't really working, and you said nah, as in, did you stop taking them?
I did.
So you stopped taking them.
I just said, forget it.
No
more.
But at that time, you weren't free of the type 2 diabetes, and you were still eating a lot of the foods that you had.
I was, but I was going to the gym a lot. The weights work was building more muscle, which I figured that can't hurt as far as that. And doing up to like 40, 45 minutes a few times a week on the elliptical.
Yeah.
And then I would go hiking because I got a dog in early 2003, a little puppy who grew up to be a 75, 80-pound husky who was very active and really loved to hike. We've got some great hiking spots here in LA, canyons and stuff.
Mm-hmm. So you were, I think what a lot of people do when they are faced with this type 2 diabetes diagnosis is they address the exercise aspect where their doctor says, hey, you need to lose some weight. Okay, I can do that. I know what to do. I need to go to the gym. I need to work out a little bit more. But did you at the time think to yourself, I'm also addressing the food aspect? Was that on your mind?
I thought I was.
Okay.
I thought I was to an extent, but not really doing a great job of it, obviously. Mm-hmm. As I found out a little bit later. 2010, my stepdad passed away from the complications of Alzheimer's, which he suffered with for a good 10 or 15, maybe even 20 years. And so I went back to New York for his funeral. And after that, I came back here and I said, okay, I got to figure out what's going on with me and turn it around. Now, I've been a Buddhist for a long time, since 1986. And we make determinations. We say, okay, we've got a problem here. There's an obstacle in my life, namely my health primarily. And I got to overcome that. So we chant about that. We chant these words, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And there's about 12 million of us worldwide in 192 countries. So there's a lot of support. And I was just chanting about that. And sometimes when we're doing that, the answers come in funny places. And I was just sitting back watching TV, but chanting for the answer of what was going on and how to deal with that. So the answer came pretty quickly. I was watching TV, flicking channels, and I came across on PBS a speech with a doctor, Dr. Neil Barnard, who I'm sure you're familiar with, of PCRM. And so I watched that speech, and it was about reversing diabetes, type 2 diabetes, with a vegan diet. And I said, yes, because I was already vegan for 4 years. And I watched that and I went, wow, I got to give this a shot. So I called his office in DC the next day, and I talked to, I think it was his assistant, I believe. She said, yeah, I think we may have somebody you can work with out there. And so I said, oh, great. And she took my email and emailed me the next day. So she connected me with 2 doctors out here, Dr. Alona Puldi and her husband, Dr. Matt Letterman. So I called them right away. And a couple of days later, I went into their office in Hollywood and picked up their book there and met them and made an appointment for shortly thereafter to go in and see her.
That's great.
And so that was right there. I was like, oh, great. That's awesome. So I went in. I had blood work done beforehand. So she had the blood work to analyze. And, you know, we did a 2-hour appointment. And, you know, of course, insurance, being set somewhere in the 1800s, doesn't cover this stuff. But luckily, I had a little extra cash that I could manage it. And it wasn't that expensive anyway. So I had my first visit with Alona. And I brought a whole big bag of supplements I'd been taking, after reading up about this supplement and that supplement and take this and that and the other. I think there were 21 of them. And she took the bag and said, okay, let's go through them. And we went through them all. And basically she said, you don't need any of this stuff. This is after she'd analyzed my blood work and everything. And at the time, my HA1C, which is the 3 or 6 month average of your blood glucose, was at 8.6, which is considered pretty severely diabetic. And but she wasn't worried at all. She was like, okay, I think we can deal with this, no problem. And so we just got started. She said, okay, keep a food diary of everything you're eating and read the stuff. And she gave me a whole binder worth of stuff of how to eat. And this is, you know, A, B, and C levels, and the A being the best things to eat, meaning plain carbs and veggies, and B being, well, some bread and pasta and things like that. And then C being kind of like, yeah, maybe once in a blue moon, have a vegan donut or a this or that, you know,
and
vegan cheese.
And was there anything on that list of things to absolutely stay away from?
Oh, absolutely.
Like what?
diet cheese, all the vegan cheese, fake cheeses. On the B thing, I think was like breads and grains and pasta, sort of like, not so good. But the number one big thing, which I don't think Dr. Barnard covered it at all in his book or his lecture, was oil. And that had me like this.
Yeah.
Oil, all oil.
Right, because
wow.
So was that a big part of your diet at that point?
Enough.
Yeah.
Enough.
Yeah.
Where I would take a spoon or 2 spoons of olive oil and, saute veggies in it or whatever.
Yeah.
Garlic and veggies and stuff.
So you were diagnosed with diabetes in the early 90s, from what I understand from your story. You were on several medications for years, went off of them because of complications, and just you didn't want to be on medications. Now that you've reversed your diabetes with food and seen such a remarkable health transformation, what would you say to people who are taking medication for type 2 diabetes?
Except for insulin. And don't forget, Dr. Poley and Dr. Letterman, Alona and Matt, worked and trained under Dr. Mcdougal directly. So they were there, and they were working with patients. And even though when I met Alona, I think she and Matt are around the same age. They were in their late 30s, and now they're in their early 40s. But they're the medical directors for the Whole Foods program. A whole chain, all 90,000 or so employees in 400-something locations. So when people have issues, they go to them, and they may well end up at an immersion up at Dr. Mcdougal's, which is generally what's been going on. And John Mackey, the co-CEO, has been very, very supportive of Dr. Mcdougal and, of course, Alona and Matt, which is wonderful. So basically, what Dr. Mcdougal has people do, unless they're on insulin, is stop taking oral meds if they're going to do the diet.
Mm-hmm. And I think at this point, maybe we can mention that, none of us, I'm not a medical doctor, you're not a medical doctor, but if someone's watching this and is inspired by your story and says, wait a minute, I could reverse type 2 diabetes using diet and exercise, a whole foods, plant-based diet, is consult with your medical professional, consult with your doctor and say, hey, I heard about this. Have you, doc, heard about me, not taking this insulin or this diabetic medication? And just simply include your medical professional if you'd like to do anything like this.
I would add too, though, since so few medical professionals and nutritionists and dietitians have a clue about what Mcdougal and Alona and Matt are doing, and Dr. Barnard for that matter, you probably want to talk to them, and you can email them. Dr. Mcdougal's very good about returning emails. Can also work with True North, and anybody can do that. And they're on the same page, if not even way, way further, for people who are not having success.
Yeah, and True North is with Dr. Clapper, is that correct?
Exactly,
and
yes.
I saw your recent interview with Dr. Clapper. You also mentioned, I want to go back a little bit because I think this is an important question. I feel like a lot of people who are maybe in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, I hear it a lot. I was always the fat kid. Growing up, I was always the fat kid. And you mentioned that in your Forks Over Knives article. Looking back at your childhood, knowing what you know now, was there a solution at that point for being a little overweight? And what was that?
Well, it's eating the way that I eat now, obviously. Because from 320 to my current 175 is a big difference. And at 6 feet, although I have actually shrunk a couple inches, probably from age and being heavier or whatever, but I'm working on that as well. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. But yeah, if I could be totally vegan and not doing any oil and low fat, if I had known back when I was 12 or 13 or 15 what I know now, I would have done it.
Yeah.
If I'd known it at 20 or 30 or 40, I would have done it.
Yeah. Lots of
Or even 50.
Lots of
Yeah.
whole fruits and vegetables, whole plant
Yeah.
foods.
Right.
You
And
got it.
carbs.
Right.
And carbs.
And so
as
tell
well.
us about that. So
Sure.
at what time did you, when I'm assuming Dr. Polday and Dr. Letterman were saying carbs are not the enemy.
Right.
Did you
Exactly.
when you went to them, did you think that carbs were the enemy? What was your opinion and stance on carbs?
I didn't really feel that they were the enemy, and I always liked carbs. But I didn't know that they were like, oh, this is a great thing if you do it right.
Right.
Without the oil, without the cheese, without the eggs, of course,
Right.
and stuff like that. So I just became better educated with it. And, very shortly thereafter, I bought a 25-pound bag of brown rice. And that was mostly what I ate.
Good for you.
My dog also was vegan from the get-go, pretty much vegetarian and then vegan, and he loved brown rice. He loved broccoli, he loved carrots, all that stuff.
Oh, it's good.
He would take them out in the backyard and gnaw on them
That's funny.
like a bone.
And I think what's important to understand here is that there's carbs and then there's carbs. There's carbs from whole plant foods, and then there's
Right.
carbs from processed, we'll say vegan junk foods or processed
Sure.
carbs. Totally different, as I'm sure you know. And
Yeah.
and I just want to emphasize that to people who are watching. So
Yeah.
if you get your carbs from whole plant foods like brown rice and potatoes, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, broccoli, you're good. You're set. Did you try any other diets? I understand, you said you exercised, but did you try
Right.
any diets from the time you were diagnosed with type 2
Yes.
diabetes?
Even before that.
So tell us
Way
about that.
back when I was a kid and when I got heavy as a kid, that was the days when the Atkins diet and like the Air Force diet or Navy diet or something, which were the high protein, full, diets of the time, which have since been proven to be wrong. But I also, shortly after I was diagnosed diabetic, I looked into Pritikin. Now, they had their main clinic on the beach in Santa Monica at the time, but I'm in the valley, which was a good long drive, and I wasn't doing that. But they opened a new center not far from where I lived, and I ended up going there. Now, the issue there was simply that, and I read Pritikin, and I liked what he had to say, but they weren't totally vegan, one, so I found shortcuts around it, which did not help. And, it helped a little bit. It had me exercising, but the food, which I enjoyed, it was not nearly as strict as Pritikin knew it had to be for the people that were coming to him. He felt at the time, I think, and I've read that and heard that he had to do something that people would comply with.
So I'm sorry. So you're saying the Pritikin Center was too strict or wasn't strict enough?
Was not nearly strict enough.
So what did they
They
allow
were
that they shouldn't have?
vegetarian.
Okay.
They were doing things with flour, I think eggs. They were doing some animal proteins, if memory serves. I could be wrong, because it was a long time ago.
Well, and I think it's all part of the evolution of medicine, I guess. And medicine has been wrong from time to time.
Anyway, so I started working with Alona, and I was checking my blood sugar, as diabetics do, and I was not noticing that much of a change. I was going, okay. And I met with her, I think, a total of 3 times, right? Because she felt like, okay, you're sending me the food diaries, and I'm adjusting this and that, and we would email and get on the phone. But she also wasn't charging me, which was great. So I had not had any blood work done since my initial blood work in April of 2010. But I was following the program, cut out all oils, and got on a much more strict version of the program, which is basically Fundamentally, I call it the Mcdougal maximum weight loss program. That's pretty darn close to what it is. What they say is the way to go. You really want to turn it around fast. Boom. That's the way to do it. So anyway, cut to September of 2010, and I had blood work done. And lo and behold, my HA1C was down to 6.4. And I'm like, whoa, that's major. And she's like, okay, we're pretty well done here. Stay in touch, email me, send me your next tests and stuff. And I had dropped when I started the program right away with her in April 2010, I was dropping 2.5 pounds a week. And I was like, whoa, I had never done that. I was like, that's amazing. And I wasn't ever hungry, which was another big, big plus. Because I like to eat,
Yeah,
for
so
neurotic reasons or whatever.
right, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people do. Everyone does, and I think
Sure.
one thing that I like to emphasize on these movies is that with a whole foods plant-based lifestyle, there was never any calorie restriction.
Right, exactly.
Never.
Very important.
Okay, so Alona Pole, they basically said, good luck, keep in touch.
Yeah.
But I sense in your voice that you don't think you truly found the answer, or
Well, no, I felt, okay, we nailed it.
right.
This is the diet. I'm staying here. I'm doing this. That was it. No ifs, ands, or buts. I had dropped about 22 pounds. When I started with her, I think it was 242, 244. When I finished, I was 222. But 2 years later, okay, I'd reversed the diabetes. I felt great about that in about 4 months. Although I had not had an HA1C, for that period. So it may have been slightly sooner. But once I got really nailed on it, okay, brown rice, throw some ketchup on, soak some veggies in, good to go. Big bowl, no problem. Good to go. Oats, loved oats, plenty of oats. And I was doing some sweeteners too. Now cut to 2012, September 2012. Now I had also in 2010 realized, okay, I've got to deal with some of these medical issues. So I got some health insurance again, and I got a doctor who actually turned out to be great, because even though he's not vegetarian or vegan, he is of Indian background. So a lot of his cousins and family are, and he's very vegetarian, vegan friendly. So in 2010, though, I saw him and he said, okay, great, reversing the diabetes. That's great. But I also went to an ophthalmologist and he said, okay, we've got to figure this out, the right eye particularly. So what I had was what's called diabetic neuropathy. Retinopathy. Now I also went to him and he saw me walk. And my walk is still a little screwy. It's called drop foot. Any doctor will know that. And they'll say, okay, that's from neuropathy, meaning no feeling. Then the way it shows up is either no feeling or pain and tingling in your feet and extremities. So it's also called peripheral neuropathy. And it really sucks. So I had lost most of the feeling in my feet, it turned out. So my ophthalmologist saw that and he was like right away, oh yeah, we gotta deal with that too. Because he's a veteran, he's been around, great guy, and like myself, a musician, but he also treats a ton of musicians here in LA, a lot of famous musicians, and he's been a sweetheart. But he referred me downstairs to a neurologist. And I saw the neurologist. He did what they call an Emg test, where they put little wires, attach them to you, and hook you up to a computer and run a low voltage, just a little zap through different parts of you. And they measure the voltage, how fast it goes from one point to another. He said, yeah, you've got neuropathy. Okay. And the problem is there's really no cure. Now, some people have had good luck reversing it with this diet. So far, mine is not reversed, unfortunately. So he suggested, okay, make sure your B12 is good. And I've been taking B12. My level's good. Make sure your vitamin D is good. My level's fine. And exercise. So that's what it is. I just had another EMG done about a month or so ago, and it had not changed. On the other hand, the retinopathy of the eyes, that has improved quite a bit. So the treatment for that, which for people who have it, which is typically diabetics, and everybody in his office, I tell them my HA1C and they're like, what? We never see that. Because if you talk to a retinologist, and that's what they primarily see is diabetics, at least 50%. And most of those people would not be having to go for that if they were eating the way that I eat. And that's a key thing. The retinopathy has gotten better. It's not 100%, but it has improved quite a bit.
Well, that's great.
The 2012 is where things really got crazy, because all of a sudden, September 21st, 2012, I ended up in the hospital because another thing that happens with diabetes and neuropathy is you can get infections in your feet, and that's a very common thing. I ended up getting a toe infection. Now, I've been seeing a podiatrist, a foot doctor, because of the neuropathy, and to make sure that your feet stay in good shape, because you can't really tell if you've got like a little sore or something unless you're really inspecting them carefully, which as a diabetic or ex-diabetic, they'll always, conventional medical people always say, take a good, look at your feet all the time, like every day. So I managed to get an infection on a toe. And the doc was like, okay, he put me on antibiotics, and that didn't do the trick. So a week later, I was due to go back to him. I went back in, and he said, okay, I'm going to take some x-rays. And they have them right in the office. So he took the x-rays and said, yeah, you see that? That's an infection. You need to deal with this. You need to go in the hospital and we'll take care of it. So that day in 2012, I went in the hospital for like the first time since I was a kid, when I had had some kidney disease that was treated. I think I was 6 or 7. And he took off a toe, one toe that had a bad infection. And so I ended up in the hospital, and that was no fun, battling with the dietitians there. But it worked out okay, because I was able to explain it, and my blood work showed I was no longer diabetic. And I had a long sit down with the dietitians and said, here's what I want. Oatmeal, plain oatmeal for breakfast, 3 big bowls, a fruit salad with nothing else, and definitely no milk, no coffee, nothing like that. For lunch, I want a big plate of brown rice and a big plate of steamed veggies, no oil, no fats, nothing like that. Maybe a salad with a little lemon or plain vinegar. And that was it, and I was fine in the hospital with that. They were pretty good about it, to the point where basically, when I go in for anything there, which is just, 10, 15 minutes from me, I run into my doctors there, and I tell them, and they know me because of all the treatments, having been diabetic. If I had known 20 years ago, I would have changed to the diet and never gone through this stuff. But I guess my mission now, a lot of it is to help people not have to do what I've had to do. Okay, 2012, cut to December 2012.
Okay.
I'm out of the hospital, out of the wheelchair I was in for quite a bit of time after losing the toe. because I wasn't able to walk with a walker or anything, because my strength had really plummeted over the years. But anyway, 2012, I go for an exam with my doctor, and he's just doing a regular exam. They do the blood work. He's got the stethoscope out. He's listening to the heart and everything. Luckily, I'd never had any heart issues, so that was good. And he goes up here, and he goes, huh, and goes and listens over on this side, goes, huh, that's not right. Something's wrong there. And now the doctor that he shared a suite with is well, actually, they just moved. I'm not sure if he still does. Was a cardiologist. He said, okay, we need to do an ultrasound. I'm hearing something on your carotid arteries. I was like, oh, great. Because even though I was vegan for a number of years already, I was vegetarian since I was 12, so that was a number of decades. Well, that wasn't quite enough. So short story, went for the ultrasound, then they said, yeah, you're about 90% blocked on your carotid arteries. I don't know if you can see this.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
That's the scar. This one had to be redone. So long story short, they referred me to the surgeon, and they did a CAT scan, and he said, yeah, we have to get on this right away. So we booked the surgery early 2013. So they can only do one at a time because you blow up. And they have to keep a spread of about 3 months between the two. So they did the first one, and I was in the hospital for a few days. And they finally realized, now my blood pressure is not coming down until I get the hell out of there. And they let me go. So that was fine. And I recovered at home, and I was able to sleep there. Because the problem was I couldn't sleep in the hospital. I was up for several days, and I like to sleep. Mm-hmm. You know, I was not into that. So they did this one. I was fine. They did the next one. Okay, that was fine. Also in 2013, I ended up, my vision was getting worse. It had gotten better from the retinology treatment, and it got worse as I was driving. I got back to driving. I was like, oh, my night driving, my vision's not so good. And the doc said, yeah, you need to get your cataracts done. And I was like, okay. So that was in the summer of 2013. So they did the cataracts. And little spread between those. Well, the retinology, my retinas didn't like having the cataracts done so well. So that got worse again. And then I went back for the retinology treatment. Now it's gotten better. My left eye is pretty much 100%. My right eye is still not, but it's getting better.
Good.
It is getting better. So that's a good thing.
Good.
So that was 2013. We're at, let me see, 4 carotid surgeries, because in 2014, well, late 2013, they realized my left side had some scar tissue. So we had to go back in. So I had to get that done again. That's why this scar is worse, because it's more recent. It's only 2.5 years. Than this side. You might not even see this side.
Yeah, barely on the right side.
Because that one's 2013. So luckily, I mean, I'm not that down on conventional medicine, dealing with this stuff and the surgery that needs to be done. They can do that stuff, which is great. So that's 4 carotid surgeries, 2 cataract surgeries, and then I actually had 2 foot surgeries. There was another one that needing doing later. So that's all good. So the diet is good, and I felt like, okay, I really wanted to lose more weight. I was stuck at like 220, 225. So what happened in my last surgery, my last carotid surgery, they're clearing out the plaque, right? They open the carotid, which is right here, and they have to like move your blood supply around because the carotid is very critical because that supplies the blood to the brain. If you don't get that, you get strokes or you say goodbye to everybody. And that sucks. It wasn't going there.
Right.
I had talked to Dr. Poldy about whether it was a good idea to do the carotid surgery. And when I told her what the amount was of the blockage, she said, well, we can turn it around, but it's going to take some time of a very, very strict version of the diet. And you might want to have it done. So after doing more research and realizing my chances of having a stroke were about something like 1 in 6 within 5 years, I said, now we better do it. We better do it. And she was fine with that. So gist of it was, when they did the last carotid surgery in 2014 in January, there's a little nerve there that's a vocal cord nerve, and they nick that. And unfortunately, that hasn't come back. So I have no left vocal cord motion, only the right works. So I also had 2 vocal cord surgeries. So that's gotten better. That's 10 surgeries. That's how I know the number's right.
Wow.
In the period of 2012 through last August 2014. So that was quite a bit.
Yeah.
And that's all from having been diabetic. So if anybody wants to know why diabetes is very controllable with medicine or insulin and all that, here's why you don't.
Yeah.
Because even if you're fairly well controlled, you're not going to be controlled a lot. And type 1s get this kind of crap, type 2s get it. Other people I'll get. I also have some kidney disease related to that, which only cropped up in 2013. That's gotten better. Okay, now we're at 2014 where you wanted to be.
Okay.
But Dr. Clapper.
Yeah, and while you're drinking there, I mean, what we can talk with we're going to talk about Dr. Clapper, but what a cautionary tale. The diabetes is not something to mess around with, and the great news with people listening to this story is it's reversible.
In 2014, after my last vocal cord surgery, I said, well, I was in the hospital and they said, okay, no food, liquid diet only. And I was just there pretty much overnight. And I said, okay, I still want to drop this last bit of weight because I was about 220, 225, I think. And I said, okay, they had me on, it ended up I was eating like blended oatmeal for my food. That's what they had me on. And I was fine with that. It wasn't bad, actually. Cooked oatmeal in a blender and sweetened a little bit with some fruit or something. Wasn't too bad. It wasn't the worst smoothie. But so they had me there overnight for the vocal cord surgery. And then I left there that morning. But I decided when I was there, okay, let's see. So I called True North because I knew that Dr. Mcdougal, when he hit a roadblock with people, sent them to Dr. Clapper and True North. So I talked to them, called them up, and what people can do is just fill out your medical info on their website and get a free consult with Dr. Goldhammer, who is the owner and founder of True North. And he really knows his stuff because even though he's a chiropractor by training, he's got many years of working with this stuff and working with all kinds of professionals at True North. So he suggested, okay, well, you can come up here. And I was thinking about it and do it fast. You can do a juice fast, but because your kidney function isn't great, we can't do a water with you. So he said, okay. And then I got on the phone with Dr. Clapper and talked with him, made a consult appointment. And they only charge like $95. It may have gone up slightly, but it's very reasonable for a 20-minute consult. And Dr. Clapper is aces. He's really sharp, really wonderful. I suggest you get him if you can.
I will try very hard.
Yeah, definitely. And Goldhammer too. Absolutely. So anyway, Dr. Clapper recommended, why don't you do a modified juice fast? And he knew my whole medical history, had all that stuff, and the lab work, and he had reviewed all that because I had emailed him that. Another thing I do, which most people probably don't, is I take all of my blood tests and all my tests of every kind, and I have the doctor send them to me or the lab send them to me. And I keep them in a little folder called medical on my computer. So I can send them to other people, health people or whatever, and I can look back and review them as well. So I think that's a good thing to kind of keep track of. Don't be afraid of it, because there's a lot of good info in there that you can learn from. And my training's as a musician, so my science training is about that much. I failed biology because I would not dissect a frog. And that was back in the 60s, late 60s. And at that point, they were like, no, you flunk. It's okay. I was like, whatever. Yeah. Now you can do that. They won't flunk you.
Huh.
They'll give you an alternative thing or a fake frog or something.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But no, back in the day, they were like, what?
Yeah.
People don't do that. But anyway, so, I recommend that. So Dr. Clapper said, okay, why don't you, here's what you should eat, which was basically just carbs. And, he said basically, and I have a whole spreadsheet of stuff he said to eat, but he said basically veggies and carbs. But don't go overboard on the carbs. And, generally eat when you're hungry. Don't eat before then. Don't eat like an early thing. And I'm a musician, so I'm generally a kind of later person. I usually won't eat before 11 or 12 o'clock anyway. So I'll generally have, some carbs, some fruit. And then I'll do like veggies, lots of veggies. He also suggests don't eat after 6 or so. So I kind of try and keep with that. So starting with that, I found my weight was dropping again. I was like, yes, perfect. So I've done a total in a year plus of about 3 consults with him. He also does Skype as well as phone. And I found the Skype was wonderful. And within that year, I dropped 50 pounds. And I was like, dang.
Great.
Yeah, now I hit a couple plateau points, 2 or 3, I forget which. And I asked him, well, what if I just do juicing for a few days or a week max? He said, okay, do that. So I had bought a juicer right when I started with him, which was last year, 2015. And I started juicing. Now I also got a farm box delivery. It's a wonderful CSA out here called Farm Fresh to You. There's actually quite a few CSAs in California, of course, and the LA area particularly. But a friend suggested this one, Farm Fresh. So I tried it and I found, oh, this is great. So for $50 a week, I get a delivery every Thursday morning of whatever I want pretty much. They have a wonderful website and I can just punch in exactly what I want. So I'll make juices with celery, with cucumber, with carrots, with some fruit, usually an apple or 2. Beets, I'll throw a beet in there sometimes. Stuff like that, different things, some greens sometimes, all kinds of trippy stuff.
So from what you've learned about juicing and becoming healthier, is juicing something that people can integrate into their diet every day? Or I feel like one of the things that people say is, oh, juice doesn't have any of the fiber in it, so it enters your bloodstream very quickly. What have you learned about juicing? And can someone who doesn't have type 2 diabetes or even someone who does integrate juicing every day into their diet?
Right. Well, the way I do it, the way I'm doing the juicing, it's primarily veggies, not fruit.
Okay.
That's the mistake a lot of people make, where it's just fruit after fruit after fruit, and they're just getting a massive sugar rush. I'll put an apple or two into a juice. Container's about that big. I think it comes to about 30, 32 ounces. And I might drink that over 2, maybe 3 days. So I'm not getting a massive sugar blast. But it does work. And for losing weight, it's great. I would recommend probably working with somebody like Dr. Glapper, who's wonderful, and doing it that way. So you're doing mostly fruits and not fruits, but veggies. And I'll throw in a little stevia to make it sweeter. I'll throw a little chunk of ginger, a little piece of turmeric. And that all works great, so it tastes good. And it's also very, very healthy.
And so to this day, you are not on a juice fast any longer, but are you still juicing regularly? And if you are still juicing, what other, are you eating a lot of brown rice and other staples?
Well, these days I've kind of switched a little bit because I've gone more recently since the summer hit. And of course, LA can get pretty hot in the summer. Although this was a fairly moderate summer for us. We only had a week or two of over 100. But we were in the 90s. It's shorts and t-shirts weather.
Sure.
And air conditioner. I just got the AC fixed in my car.
Good.
Thank goodness. So needed that. But anyway, I found with the heat and everything, I really like just doing the raw veggies. So I was just doing raw veggies in a salad, and I'll do a 3-2-1 dressing, which for your viewers who don't know is vinegar. Often I do mostly balsamic, Dijon mustard, like 3 parts vinegar, 2 parts Dijon, and 1 part of a sweetener. And typically for the sweetener, I just did a little bit of grapes, and I'll throw in maybe do a little stevia to sweeten it some more. And often I'll add some basil leaves. I like that a lot.
From your heaviest, you've lost in the neighborhood of 140 pounds from what I can piece together.
Yeah, 145 is the number.
From what you've learned and experienced and read, why does this lifestyle work so well? How would you put it to someone? Why does this work so well?
Right. Well, 1, you're never hungry. 2, you're eating the healthiest way that humans can and should be eating.
And that's
More than that, look at me.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm, from 320, and you see the photos in Veg World and Forks Over Knives of the befores in the early and mid 90s, and the afters from now.
Right.
A couple of months ago. That's a huge difference.
Absolutely. And results don't lie. I mean,
actual proof is what we call it in Buddhism.
Right.
Actual proof is the number one thing.
So let's say you were speaking to a close friend or even a small group of people, what advice would you give someone who is trying to become healthier and or trying to shake a chronic disease? General advice.
Right. Well, for friends and friends of friends who are heavy or obese, who are diabetic or pre-diabetic is the new phrase they're using, I just tell them what I've done and refer them to my stories and say, first of all, cut out the meat and dairy. Number 1, cut out the oil. All of that right now. If you do nothing else, do that. And that's a huge, huge, huge difference. Because everybody's system is somewhat different, a little bit. We're all humans, we're all 98, 99% the same. But the fact is, some people can tolerate things better than others. But if you just look at people, I look at people who are my contemporaries or are younger than me, and I just see so many people who are heavy, who are obese, who have just all kinds of problems coming up. I just tell them, look, this is what works.
Yeah.
This is what you would do. And I refer them to True North. I refer them to Mcdougal. If they happen to work at Whole Foods and are that lucky, I refer them to Alona and Matt.
I've kind of reached the end here. Mike Meltzer, your story is so inspirational, and even though you had that line of surgeries of the, honestly, bad luck thrown in there with some things that, the coronary, the calcifications, which again, like you mentioned,
carotid, not coronary.
I'm sorry, carotid calcifications.
That's okay. I've been lucky. The coronary area is all clear.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they do scans on that every once in a while, and that's only ever come up flat out clear. That's probably from being vegetarian.
Now, did the doctors? I'm not going to close. Actually, did the doctors, Dr. Polday or Letterman, or any doctors along the way, ever say that your carotid, that calcifications could have been prevented? Like that was caused by food. It wasn't genetic.
Absolutely from food.
Okay.
And what Alona had said, that was just from eating all the crap when I was vegetarian, and even when I was vegan and eating the fake cheese and the vegan bread and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, these days it's like, okay, once in a blue moon I'll have a vegan tortilla with no oil in the tortilla, or a sandwich. I bought a loaf of Dave's Ezekiel bread like a week or so ago and realized, that's why I don't eat bread. I went through it in 2 days with veggie sandwiches.
We've gone over a lot in this interview, and you've told us a lot. But if there was anything that I didn't ask or anything that you wanted to cover, Mike Meltzer, I'm going to give you the last word. What would you like to say to our audience? This is definitely reversible, whether it's diabetes, type 2, type 1, I understand improves a lot. And the amount of side effects and complications also decrease because type 1s are very prone to that. And you can look into that, or you send me an email. Whatever the case may be, coronary disease, diabetes, all these diseases of excess, chronic diseases, are all food related. All of them, every single one. I can't think of a single one that's not. And when people say, your eating is just genetic, that's just an excuse for doctors to use who don't know about this way of eating and don't know that it is reversible. So it's really important to educate your doctors, as I do, constantly. I do. They all know me. They see me in the hall in the hospital, because I'd been going for throat therapy, right? Voice therapy. And I'd run into all my docs, and they'd see me and say, you've lost so much more weight now. And that's always great. And they see that, and they think about it, and I refer stuff, and I have their emails, and I send them these stories and all kinds of stuff. So, a big part of it is educating the medical community, because even though the number of doctors is becoming better and greater, and Dr. Clapper and Mcdougal and all of them educate other doctors and their contemporaries, the percentage of doctors who are hip to this is this big. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. Finding plant-based doctors, even in LA, is a huge challenge. Huge challenge. I mean, I know personally, or through Facebook, I know of, other than Dr. Polday and Letterman, who no longer see private patients because of their workload with the Whole Foods people. I know of one plant-based doctor, Dr. Heather Schenkman, who's a cardiologist. And that's it. And LA has a crap load of doctors here.
Tons and tons and tons.
Yeah. But hopefully with this interview and with you spreading the message and me spreading the message, hopefully it'll get out there. And we just
have to keep doing the job, doing the work.
With the prescribed plant series I'm doing, where I hope to interview more medical doctors. Maybe a medical doctor, if they have who doesn't prescribe plants, who doesn't use whole foods lifestyle medicine, maybe they watch 15 minutes and they're inspired. So I think that's a great way to summarize it and a great way to end it.
Yeah.
Mike,
and also try and do an interview with Alona and Matt.
I would like to do that, and actually,
definitely, I'll give you contact info.
Thank you. And
sure.
you mentioned Heather Shankman. She also had a Forks Over Knives story, I believe.
Right, she did recently.
And I see that her picture is she looks like an athlete, like a triathlete.
Triathlete, yeah.
So I hope to interview her as well.
Yeah.
So Mike,
that's great.
Mike Meltzer, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Ian. Really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing the final cut.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.